The manager of finance and administration at the time received a 56% increase and a title change from a manager to a CFO. 5 other supervisors or managers received increases ranging from 53 to 59%. There was only one director of this executive group that received an increase below 34%, and that was 13.63%. 6 executives received title changes from managers to directors. 1 executive received a title change from manager to CFO, as I mentioned previously, and the previous executive director received a title change to CEO. Here are the average increases by classification, and that's what that graph represents. The executive team, 42.59%. It's actually 53.67% if you exclude that one aforementioned outlier, okay? Dispatch, 21.23. Drivers, 20.22. Administration, 18.43. Operations, 17.23. Mechanics, 16.55. Facilities, 16.19. I'm not presenting this data today to discuss the validity or merits of the salary study. A salary study is simply a tool and a market indicator of job classifications and pay. It's the evaluation and implementation of the results of that information that requires scrutiny and transparency. When conducting such a survey and prior to implementation, it's incredibly important to objectively evaluate these costs, not just the costs in the current year either, but you got to look at the subsequent years as well. Often these costs can be absorbed initially, but when you look out and you roll them out for future years, revenues are insufficient to maintain the increased obligations and costs associated with implementation of something like this. This can be seen in 2025. And if you go back to that graph I had there for 2025, we lost our internet connection, folks. But if you have your graph, I put a little siren right there where things change. That's where things hit the road. Okay, that's why I put that symbol there. You will see the point in which expenditures exceed revenue growth and projections. This is there is an inverse relationship projected from 2026 moving forward. We'll get that back up here as soon as we can, folks. Keep in mind that these increases that we're talking about right here are compounding each year moving forward, okay? Every step increase now, every COLA, every leave buyback that is initiated and executed, every increase in benefit factors moving forward, and any costs associated with termination or retirement cash outs. Each of these costs I just mentioned increased dramatically as they're based on an increased base wage rate. Okay, I'm sure all of you understand that. You've seen this before. These costs were not appropriately accounted for prior to implementation. The governing board was told that the total cost of implementation of the class and comp study, including transition to PERS, would be $1.539 million. And you can see that in the notes to the meeting minutes for November of 2022. Okay. During the November 22nd, 2022 Skagit Transit Board meeting, the governing board was told that, and I quote, "This expense is sustainable with our operating revenues." The governing board at the time, you're only as good as your information, were told this expense is sustainable with our current operating revenues. As you can see from my graph, that statement is inaccurate. Also inaccurate were the cost of implementation as presented to all of the acting board members during that period. The actual and appropriate cost of implementation should have been communicated as approximately $2.335 million. This is a $797,000 discrepancy in just the year of implementation and just on base wages. Other discrepancies we discovered when reconciling the communicated increase to the actual increases included. Cost estimate of the PERS adoption was based on prior wages, not on the proposed new wages from the class and comp study. PERS implementation exceeded communicated costs by approximately $146,000. The PERS buy-in amount was underestimated by approximately $477,000. Folks, add this to the numbers. These are cumulative. A 4.25% COLA increase in the amount of $61.8 thousand was not accounted for in the total cost analysis, as it was not calculated on the new base wage rate. The total cost of all other discrepancies totaled approximately $684.8 thousand. Combine that with the costs I talked about previously, the combined cost of implementation was understated by at least $1.41 million. This is approximately double the cost of implementation communicated to the governing board at the time. And this is a conservative estimate. After going through the information and watching the presentations that were provided to the governing board, it's clear that there was a real, significant lack of transparency and details. Excuse me. No, we got internet? Okay. During the meeting, all right, remember folks, we went back, I've been diving into this. I've watched the meeting minutes. I saw what's presented to the governing board at the time. Every sheet of paper, every word spoken, all right? So I'm going back, every word that wasn't spoken. I've gone back and I have reconciled all of this because I'm thinking, what happened here, okay? Let me tell you this. There were several questions and opportunities for transit leadership to disclose relevant and ethically sound information that would have changed the narrative that was being presented by leadership at the time. The narrative was that the implementation of this class and comp study was about the drivers, service staff, etc. There were no mentions of the very relevant fact that by far the largest increases were for the executive team and those conducting the study who held the relevant details and information, details that were not presented. Here are some of the questions, requests, concerns that were posed during the presentation at the November 22nd board meeting. I had to watch this several times to get some of this stuff down. There were requests to see comparisons of the proposed new placements compared to where staff were on the old schedule. This would have shown the unprecedented individual increases in compensation for select staff. There was a concern expressed that the implementation is a long-term proposition and that there is an assumption being made that the organization will not need the reference grant funds for anything else. And those reference grants, there was a claim made that there was some grant funding that was going to fund this increase. That it's a no-brainer. There's funding for it. Let's do it. I quote one governing board member who stated, that is a big assumption this board has to make, and that's in regards to that funding being dedicated for this. You don't need it for anything else? That was recognized, and it was posed. A concern was expressed that the governing board just received the information 4 days prior to the meeting, and leadership is looking to implement in 9 days. They did not feel they had adequate information nor time to properly vet the information and the decision that they had to make and that they were given. At one point in the meeting, an inquisitive statement was made by a governing board member that the coach operators and service folks, cleaning staff, are getting the bulk of this adjustment, because the narrative was that this was about retention, operations. That was the narrative. So that inquisitive statement was regarding that and pointing this out. Not a single presenter spoke up at that meeting that the relative increase was actually highest for the executive team. That is a major omission. Here are some of the responses that were given to the governing board during that same meeting. I quote, "Grants will cover these. The grant revenue will compensate for the lost fare revenue." This was after concerns had been expressed by the governing board over lost fare revenue and the cost of implementation, excuse me. Another response from the leadership team to the governing board while they were asking very good critical questions. The proposed budget includes the cost of all elements of the compensation study and implementation. At one point, a few members from the governing board expressed a desire for more information and more time to evaluate the proposal, possibly postponing approval to the next meeting in December. The former manager of finance and administration was asked about the impact of postponing passage of the resolution approving the implementation of the study. Directly asked, What's the impact if we wait and we get more information? His response was, and I quote, "If this does not pass, I've thought about it a lot. How does that change my preliminary budget? I'm going to have to go in and add $500,000 in overtime." I turned myself off. I apologize. I'm passionate. I apologize. I don't see the relevancy there with the situation, the questions at hand. The kindest word I can use to characterize this entire process, the kindest word, is gross negligence. Period. The salary survey was effective in establishing an updated salary schedule by bringing each grade and step to market. This ensures that there is both upward mobility for staff who may be confined by an outdated salary schedule. This is important, folks. This is good leadership. It also ensures that positions are placed in the appropriate level or grade based on responsibilities of the job. The salary survey is not the basis for 50% raises to individual salaries when the communicated differential to the governing board of the time was only 15 to 18%. How did we get here? 15 to 18%, we get 40, 50, 60 range raises? At no point during the presentation or in any of the materials presented was the following disclosed about the respective individual pay increases. You've seen the percentage increases as were on my graph earlier, but let me quantify for you some of the individual annual salary increases for 4 of the executive team members, 2 of which conducted the study. $68,000 annual increase to salary. $68,000, folks. $62,000. $56,000. $48,000. That's 4 of your executives. 4. None of you knew that. None of you on that governing board, if you were there, had any idea that this was going to be the results of that study. Imagine going to bed one night and waking up the next day with a $60,000 increase in your pay. Unfathomable. None of you here, governing board members, and I can guarantee you, or past who were part of this, would have approved this. I've seen you work. I've been through this process many times. It's incredibly upsetting. I want to point out that the vast majority of the staff who received these generous increases had absolutely no involvement in conducting the survey or compiling the results. Nor did they have any fiduciary responsibility to communicate this to the governing board. They are simply hardworking, dedicated, long-term transit employees, and I want them to know, who may be listening here today, that I have 0 questions about their integrity. They did nothing. This was not their job. This was not their study. This was not their responsibility. So what has changed? We see all this. What's changed? New leadership in key positions. Here's what I'm talking about. New CEO, Crystal Stidham, 0 involvement in the class and comp study. New Director of Finance, Joe Stewart, 0 involvement in the class and comp study. New Finance and Accounting Manager, Chris Arkle, 0 involvement in the class and comp study. All of us have been painstakingly going through materials presented to the governing board, watching the board meetings to determine what was and what was not communicated, reconciling what was communicated to what was implemented, reconciling the communicated cost to the actual cost. In hindsight, we have that data. I'm not making things up here, folks. This is data. It's there. We've reconciled it. We've looked at it. Chris is a CPA and also a former auditor. He's looked at it individually. I've looked at it individually. Crystal has looked at it individually. Going back to what has changed, as of August 2024, the new CEO implemented a number of cost-saving measures to reduce operating costs, mainly staff reductions at the executive level and reorganization. Why at the executive level? There's some imbalance. Moving forward, okay, I just gave you the details. Moving forward, new leadership is committed to transparency and responsible management of taxpayer funds. New leadership will not unreasonably benefit from class and compensation studies that they themselves conduct. Results from future studies will be provided in detail so the governing board can adequately evaluate the individual as well as the collective increases and the impact these will have on the organization as a whole. New leadership will work to address the looming operating deficit through the identification of new revenue sources and or reductions in expenses. Can we go back? Oh, there you are, Larissa. Can we go back to the graph that shows that relationship, the very first one, please? This is the data from our long-term plan that I had put into a graph. The green line represents our total revenues, black total expenses. If we remain status quo, we were told, you were told, this is sustainable. We have the revenues. You can see very clearly that just was not the case. That was a massive miscalculation. We are here, folks. There's the alarm. It's 2025. You can see that relationship has changed. Finally, I realize that the information I provided this morning may make some people in this room uncomfortable. For that, I apologize. However, my role is to deliver the objective information, both positive and negative, ensure we are acting in the best interest of the taxpayers, staff, governing board, and stakeholders who rely on Skagit Transit and expect sound financial management and decisions. That's all I have for you folks today. I thought it was very important that these things were clearly described. It puts the governing board, it puts current leadership in a very tough situation. That relationship of revenues and expenses is no longer going to be able to sustain the organization. So I'd be happy to try to answer any questions anyone may have.
First of all, Joe, Mr. Stewart, thank you. This is sobering. Some of us were kind of aware of what's been going on, that efforts by Ms. Sidham in getting this partially rectified, but it is a concern. A lot of organizations have actually gone to their senior management and asked them to kind of recognize the need for doing a little bit more of a wage compression so that people who are being paid less can get paid a very good wage. That was kind of been a bit of a standard in a lot of places over the last couple of years, and so it's troubling to hear what was brought to us was the antithesis of that, and
yes.
and so that is very troubling. But
it is. I agree.
Thank you for taking the time to identify this and bring it to us. And any comments? Go ahead, Crystal. Or no, sorry, Jack. Commissioner Janicki, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Commissioner Browning. Joe, this is both sobering and makes me sick to my stomach. I chaired that meeting and there was a sense of urgency around getting the drivers and line staff more fairly compensated was the first part, and the transition over to the PERS retirement system, which would be a huge benefit for the organization. There was a sense of urgency in making that happen before the calendar year ran out, because the faster you get that slide over into PERS, there was a greater benefit. The part on your moving forward, perhaps that just should be, let's put a pin in it. There was never this conversation about reclassification of positions. So it's one thing to get the comp study, but the biggest variance here is on that we did not have position control in place as an organization. And that also, it might be a Crystal question, but that also has been rectified now, so that could not have happened, because those gigantic $62,000 increases, a good portion of that was because the title of the position became different, which put them on a different page in the comp study for those executive positions. Isn't that correct?
Generally, when you implement a salary survey, like, that's why I say that the salary survey is a useful tool. I have no issues with the information materials that were put together by the third-party administrator who did this work. It's the implementation. It gives people room to grow. It's not a green light to jump $60,000 overnight, normally you'll see organizations will evaluate the results, they'll look at the current staff, they'll look at the recommendations in the structure, and they'll move that person to the next step in that particular grade or level. Okay, there may be instances where there is a big disparity because someone is in this position, but based on all these duties and jobs and things that they're doing, it maybe would more likely and realistically be classified maybe up a level. And so you would put them at that, maybe they get an additional bump. But the way this was done was it was hard to watch for me too. I mean, I'd heard some things, but it was when I got into it, I started watching that. And let me say for the governing board, Commissioner Janicki, anyone who was involved in that, any reasonable person who was sitting on that governing board, listening to the presentation with the materials they received, would have come and probably made the same decision. I mean, there just wasn't the information you folks needed. And knowing what I know now and seeing that, you have to ask yourself why. Why the urgency? Why the lack of information? It's very, very concerning. I mean, at the very least, the governing board should be involved in understanding that, hey, Joe Stewart's going to go from a manager, he's going to jump director level. We're going to make him the CEO. And by the way, he's going to get $62,000 of an increase. These other directors, hey, there needs to be discussion, there needs to be transparency with this process, because I guarantee you it absolutely completely would have changed the results of the study and would have had impact on the organization. Now we're here. Now look what we're dealing with. And so I find no fault. In fact, I was very impressed with the governance board, yourself included, Mayor Sexton at the time, Mayor Miller. They were asking Commissioner Leeson as well. They were asking questions. You know, there was a feeling. You can go back to other meetings as well. There was a couple meetings where there was dialogue about the class and comp study. There were questions that were posed. The amount of omissions is what is for me is so concerning. Like, I want to make sure my governing board understands this, because it's very concerning. So yeah, that was part of it. There may have been some step increases, but the way this was implemented is it's hard to explain or understand.
Chair Browning, can I?
Yes.
So just a comment. Thank you for making me feel at least slightly better about a vote that I took, that probably the vote that I most regret and that I can think of. So again, I share Commissioner Janicki's sickening feeling looking back on that, and but still, you know, it is about trying to get the right information at the time. We certainly thought we were in a desperate situation with drivers at the time. This was a way that we could compensate them appropriately, so we could get drivers, so we could keep the main thing that we do is providing that service, and we didn't have enough drivers. So again, thank you, and fantastic presentation.
Thank you. And I'll agree, watching that, that's exactly how I felt. But I had the benefit of knowing the reality, the data, the details, what was going to happen. And so I got to watch these presentations knowing what was in there. And then when the questions are posed, knowing what omissions were made, knowing what wasn't disclosed, it was troubling.
Anyone else? Yes, please.
Thank you. So you twice put in there quite clearly, which is a big ouch, the operating trend, the way that it's going. We're at the crunch point right now. What might be the plan, the strategic plan to get our arms around this and to bring it into a more doable budget?
That's a really good question. Something I've been asking myself too, and you know, dialogue that we've been having. You know, looking forward, transit funding is unique from what I'm used to. You know, certainly we have our tax base with this, which is 0.4%, and we can expect that we may or may not. We know the economy is volatile, but we've seen some growth in the area. You know, we've seen some tax increases in terms of the amount of revenue generated because of increased sales tax and so on and so forth. But when it comes to the transit, 0.4% of the sales tax figure is the lion's share of the revenue for transit. But So much of the other funding is from state and federal grants. And
Anybody else? All right. Sobering, but thank you. Again, Joe, it's very important that we're willing to look as deeply as you have and prepare early and start thinking about solutions.
You've done a fantastic job of analyzing and again, asking all the right questions and digging into the data. This is all data-based information that we're providing to you today. So,
yeah.
Okay, I'm going to move on unless there's any further questions. And just in the essence of time, I'm going to run through this quickly. Please stop me if you have questions. Right. MOA2, we still do not have a resolution for the gutters or soffits. We're still working collaboratively with the contractor for a fair and amicable resolution. We received 100% design and the budget estimate last week. Once we have our federal grants in place, we will go out to bid for phases 2 and 3. Due to delays with the FTA, our new anticipated timeline to start construction is now February or March of 2026. Our project manager is working on having a constructability review done soon. In terms of recruitments, we have a class of 5 that started on May 1st. 1 student didn't make it through training. 2 passed their CDL and on their own. The other 2 should be released by next week. We will have 85 drivers once all the students are released, and we have funding for 86 authorized positions. And to Commissioner Janicki's point, yes, every single PCN position control number has and will be approved. Every change to the organizational structure has and will be approved moving forward. Despite being nearly fully staffed, I'm sorry, Commissioner Janicki, did you have a comment? Thank you. Despite being nearly fully staffed, we continue to cancel service weekly, as one of our online folks mentioned. Now that we have the software and staff in place, and when I say software, I'm talking about Remix, which is will give us information on service that we're scheduled to provide, and Pay Northwest, the data for us to pull productivity reports. We will be looking at the schedule work and driver productivity to determine if we are appropriately staffed. We are still working on part-time language with AFSCME leadership, and we are starting another class on August 1st for bus drivers. KPIs for June, we have 4 drivers out on a long-term absence plus 3 working modified schedules. We canceled 64.45 hours of service in June, up from 57.10 in May. And that's with supervisors driving 269.52 hours, up from 132.35 in May. We had 49 unscheduled absences for June, resulting in 1,832 hours of OT, which cost the department almost $96,000. That's down from 125.5 in May. Our total overtime through June is $508,000. We're trending to hit or exceed $1 million in overtime for 2025, and we only budgeted $500,000. A full financial report was included in the packet, but I wanted to provide a few highlights. Sales tax revenues, we did pretty good in April, up 11.08% year over year from April of 24 to April of 25. As Joe mentioned, we still have not been able to draw down on our federal operating grant. The FTA just finalized our grant agreement, and I executed the grant yesterday. We will submit for a drawdown by the end of the week and expect to have those funds by the end of next week, and that's about $1.5 million. As noted, we are experiencing cash flow issues since we have not been able to draw down on our federal funds. And as a reminder, the $1 million that the board approved today are funds that we budgeted as revenues to balance the budget for 2024 and 25. In addition to the FTA funds that Councilmember Moulton mentioned earlier, we had $2.8 million. We split half of that over 24 and half of that over 25. So those reserves are gone. There is no plans to reinvest that $1 million. We budgeted $980,500 in 2024 and $992,500 interest from our investment account to balance the budget. So we will probably need to withdraw an additional almost $1 million, $973,000 by the end of this year, again, for our operating costs. DRS update, the auditor will be presenting the results of the audit on Friday at the next governance meeting. Our only issue requiring corrective action is that we need to start identifying what floating holidays employees are cashing out. We don't have to do this retroactively, just moving forward. There were no other issues found. Governance committee update, our next meeting is this coming Friday after the DRS audit. Nate will be giving a presentation regarding changing credit card providers to the state. And again, moving forward, since we're pretty much done updating the financial policies, we're going to start using those meetings to fully engage the board in the class and comp study to ensure that it's a truly transparent process this time. For ridership, fixed route ridership was up 5.53% from May of 24 to May of 25. Paratransit ridership is up 8.56% from May of 24 to 25. And then really quickly, we will be participating in the following community events. August 7th, Pioneer Picnic. August 7th, Skagit Fair Family Resource Day. August 7th, Skagit Fair and United Way Diaper Drive. August 9th, Triumph Teen Back to School Event. August 21st, Senior Park in the Day. August 21st, Reading and Resource Event. August 23rd, Back to School Fair. Looks like Burlington. And August 28th, the Concrete Back to School Event. And that concludes my CEO report. Thank you.
Questions? Larissa, thank you for keeping us updated on the events that we're at, and the things like fair will be there for sure, but it's good to see some there. Commissioner Wiesen will be at the Pioneer Picnic, and that would be good. So we'll be there to support you and speak well.
Thank you.
So yes. All right. Now, is Judy still on? Judy, are you still there?
Yes, I just had to unmute. Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Why don't you go out and have at it?
Okay, thank you very much. For July, we have a new applicant to fill the slot for the CAC committee. So you will be hearing more about that after our next meeting. He will be attending. The other thing is we had our annual route evaluation day. We usually take a trip once a year. We pick a route and we evaluate that route and things about that route that we can discuss and make recommendations on. We will be having a working meeting September the 9th from 4 to 6 p.m., which will be a good thing because there's a lot for us to discuss. We also gave an overview of a member profiling, route profiling, like the different routes members are taking, how they can help give information to the rest of the committee and to Skagit Transit about what's going on on the routes that they do take. So this will be interesting. You'll hear more about that later. Then, of course, our staff report was given. One of the things we also, I will say, is we got to look at some of the proposed things that will be happening in the living document moving forward with the transit plans. And we are concerned about seeing a lot of routes that with recommended cancellations. If one of these goes through, there are 2 members in our committee that are going to be affected by these. So we are concerned about these. So there's going to need to be future discussions on this. But that will just about do it for that. Our next meeting is August the 12th. So respectfully submitted, Judy Jones, CAC Chair.
Thank you, Judy. I would really like for all of us on the board to at least consider doing some secret shopping and go ride a bus sometime, just to get an idea of what it looks like and what some of the people look like. And Judy, I've always thought you need to have a couple of young people on your citizen advisory group because they are our future for riding the bus. And how do we get them included?
I would absolutely love it. And we've already put forward some suggestions on how to, as a conduit, like maybe to the college and so forth. So where these suggestions have gone, I have no idea. But yes, we've been talking about this for the last few years. So I'm in total agreement with that. And with some of the discussions we've had too, I'm definitely, it just hasn't moved forward when I've submitted at this point, but onward and upward.
Great. Anything else? All right. With that, then we can go ahead and adjourn this meeting. It's 12:29. Again, it's still July 16th, 2025. We are adjourned.